The tech war is really heating up because this might be the last chance for the United States to block China from rising up and challenging its position of power through technology. The chip war is being fueled by massive funding from the Chinese government, up to $81 billion, along with the announcement of infrastructure projects to develop the semiconductor industry. China's determined that in this generation, it will develop its own chip industry independently without relying on anyone else in the world. Wow, that's a huge amount of money, and the competition is fierce. But why are they fighting so hard? In this video, I'll break down the Chip War 101 for you, starting with the epic story of China. Let's start with the chip grudge. China was basically kicked out by the United States, pushed out of the high-tech chip circle, and blocked from joining in. The US put up barriers so that TSMC couldn't sell chips to China, and ASML from the Netherlands couldn't sell chip manufacturing technology to China either. This all happened around 2019, and it really put China in a tough spot. Back then, Huawei used to get its chips from TSMC to make their devices, right? And Huawei was once ranked among the top sellers. They were in the global top 5, but once the US clearly blocked China from joining the chip game, Huawei totally dropped out of the rankings. From being in the top 5, they didn't even make the top 10 anymore. So during that time, Huawei was really discouraged, almost ready to give up on chips altogether. Back then, the smallest chip technology China could produce was only 12 to 14 nanometers. But at that time, in 2019, the US was already producing chips at 5 nanometers. And then, in 2023, China and the United States invited Gina Raimondo, the US Secretary of Commerce, to China to sit down and negotiate about, being flexible on chip technology between China and the US. But Gina Raimondo made it clear that there was no room for flexibility, no room for negotiation on this matter. This is fundamentally because it concerns the national security of the United States. As for chip technology, I will not permit any further discussion on the matter, period. After that, Gina Raimondo was humorously designated by the Chinese public as the brand ambassador for the Huawei Mate 60 Pro right away. Take a look at this picture right here. Well, I do feel a little sorry for her because she had just finished saying that she would definitely not let China have that technology. But then the Chinese public immediately started making fun of her. During Gina Raimondo's trip to China, Huawei launched the Huawei Mate 60 Pro very quietly, just online. But it sold out within just a few hours. This was very different from when Apple launches a product, because when the iPhone, they usually hold a big event, right? And their products also sell out quickly. But what really shocked the United States wasn't that Gina Raimondo was made the brand ambassador for Huawei. That was just a joke. What really surprised America was that when they opened up the Huawei Mate 60 Pro, inside it was a 7 nanometer chip. That was a shock because everyone in the world knew that China could only produce chips at 14 to 12 nanometers. No one knew that China could produce 7 nanometer chips, or when they even started doing it. And this chip in question, China didn't secretly import it or bring it in from another country. They made it themselves. The logo clearly announces that this chip was made by SMIC, China's own giant chip manufacturer, truly Chinese in both company and origin. America couldn't help but be shocked by this because they only ever knew that China could make chips at 12 to 14 nanometers, which is technology. Back in 2015, it was thought that China was 8 years behind in chip manufacturing. But by 2023, China managed to produce 7 nanometer chips, which is a technology the United States achieved in 2018. That means China has closed the technology gap with the US from being 8 years behind to just 5 years behind. And this advanced chip technology isn't just being used in cell phones. It's not limited to that at all. It's not just for computers either. They use it for military purposes. They put these chips in fighter jets, missile warheads, and even nuclear warheads. So if China really manages to develop chip technology that's as advanced as the United States, you have to ask, who would they want to target first? And the reason America is so protective, so extremely protective, is because the technology used to make these high-tech chips is what they're really guarding. To produce those ultra-tiny chips, you need incredibly advanced technology. That technology is called extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV machine for short. This is a tool that takes decades to build and develop, and each machine costs hundreds of millions of dollars. This technology is what allows patterns to be etched onto chips as small as 3 nanometers. There's only one company in the world that can make these EUV machines, and that's ASML from the Netherlands. And ASML, by the way, has never been authorized to sell these EUV machines to China. What ASML is allowed to do is sell machines for producing chips with technology that's just a bit below EUV to China. These are called deep ultraviolet lithography machines, or DUV. With this technology, the smallest chips that can be produced are only about 12 to 14 nanometers, which is what China is currently able to manufacture. So while China doesn't have EUV, it does have DUV. This means that China will adapt DUV technology so that it can produce chips that aren't just limited to the standard 12 to 14 nanometers that DUV is designed for, but actually modify DUVs to manufacture chips as small as 7 nanometers. You might wonder, just how small are these chips, and why do we need such advanced technology? Well, chips at this size are incredibly tiny. At 7 nanometers, they're about the size of a bacterium, and if you go down to 5 nanometers, that's even smaller than a virus. And if you go down to 3 nanometers, which is currently the smallest size that can be manufactured in the world, it's only just a bit bigger than human DNA. So why is it so important to make chips smaller? And why is there such fierce competition to achieve this? It's because the smaller the chip, the more space there is to fit transistors onto it. The more transistors you have, the greater the processing power. More power means more intelligence, right? It makes things smarter, generates less heat, and lowers the production cost per unit. Simply put, it means that any kind of technology device will become more intelligent, more efficient, use less power, and be cheaper to produce. So how important are chips? They're extremely important because they're the intelligence behind every device we use in our daily lives, even on the battlefield, whether it's a smartphone, computer, microwave, or any other device. Twitter, or any other device, if you manufacture the hardware but don't have a chip, it just won't work. It's like the human body. Without a brain, it's just an empty shell, no different from a rubber doll that can't do anything or perform any of the functions humans can. The world's major chip manufacturers are South Korea's Samsung, Taiwan's TSMC, and the United States' Intel. And it's easy for them to block China because none of those 3 major sources are China's allies. The chips the world really needs are called logic chips, which are produced by TSMC. As for Samsung, they mainly focus on manufacturing memory chips, the ones with a lot of storage, right? Intel, on the other hand, has recently been outsourcing a lot of its production to TSMC, and TSMC can produce logic chips, which is exactly what the whole world needs. The world needs TSMC, so it has become the bottleneck of the modern world. In the past, the world's bottleneck was those narrow maritime straits used for oil exports. Everyone would gather at those choke points, right? But now, TSMC is the new choke point in the modern world. No matter what kind of electronic components are being produced, if you can't get chips from TSMC, you simply can't manufacture intelligent, functional products that actually work with smart capabilities. You get it, right? Am I explaining this clearly? I think you do. This modern world bottleneck phenomenon really shows just how important TSMC is to the world. A clear example was what happened during COVID. Since everywhere was unable to export, TSMC couldn't export either. At that time, when TSMC couldn't ship out chips, it shook the entire global supply chain, causing an impact of over $1 billion. And this is one of the main reasons why China wants to take control of Taiwan, because in today's era, whoever controls technology controls the world. And most importantly, when it comes to chip technology, TSMC has clearly shown that it's not just about having tons of money or a huge workforce. You can't just build a chip company to compete with TSMC that easily. TSMC was founded back in 1987, and that really shows that having money alone isn't enough. Having people alone isn't enough. You also need time to develop, and time is a resource you just can't compete for. It's priceless. So has China done everything it can? Absolutely. China has done everything possible to develop its own chip technology. At one point, they even recruited about 3,000 chip engineers from Taiwan to help advance chip technology in China. Back then, China was willing to pay double salaries and even take care of the engineers' families. Engineers from Taiwan moved to China, and did China succeed? Yes, they did. But were they able to develop chips to the same level as Taiwan? Not quite. This is exactly why the United States is fighting tooth and nail to protect Taiwan from China. Because if a conflict breaks out and China manages to take Taiwan by force, they would also seize TSMC. And if China successfully takes over Taiwan and TSMC, they definitely wouldn't export chips to the United States anymore. We would see this exact situation, America would be absolutely shocked, because without chips from TSMC, the new iPhone models or the next generation fighter jets that are about to be developed would lose all their capabilities. That's because the chips would be gone.